The X100VI is my first Fujifilm camera ever, and I've been lucky enough to find one pretty much since day one without any pre-order. If you know me, you probably know that I mainly shot with Sony, but since I picked up this camera, love blossomed between us. But why did I even buy a Fujifilm in the first place if I mainly shoot Sony and I have no problem at all? The answer is not what you might think. In fact, I bought this camera for my girlfriend, like you might have bought a PS5 for your partner. No, but seriously, we traveled a lot this year. We've been in Berlin, we've been in London, Paris, Rome, Milan, Matera, and in 2 weeks we'll fly to Japan. So I wanted so badly to share this passion that I have for street photography with her for several reasons, but actually also to keep her busy while I'm doing street photography, so she can do the same without blaming me for lacking attention. Smart boy being smart. And you know what? It worked. Turns out she actually liked taking pictures on the street. But soon she fell into the analog photography hole, and this means that I have the X100VI basically all for me now. Jokes aside, I needed something small and compact to carry in our bags and in our pocket when we travel, and even when we go out in our city for shooting. That's because my A7R5, it's a super fun and I love that camera, but it's almost double the size of the X100VI. But yeah, let's get into the topic of today's video, which is my street photography workflow with Fujifilm camera. I've always been a 50mm guy, and to this day, the 50mm is still my favorite focal length. But with a 35, it's a whole different story. I focus more on a scene instead of focusing on an isolated subject. Consequently, I add more element in the background and in the foreground, and I look for scenes instead of people, instead of faces, and instead of details. But the best part is that with the 35 you can easily compose for a scene, but you can also take a portrait on the street, and it feels so much more natural than with a 50mm. I feel like I have to think less because it's very similar to what I'm actually seeing. But at the same time I can just punch in and add some intriguing element into my frames. And maybe that's the reason why the 35 is so damn popular. One of the things that I love the most about this Fuji camera is the lift shutter, because with the lift shutter it's so silent that I can shot in disguise without being noticed, even when I'm pretty close, and that's unmatched for me. Because for instance, with my Sony I have to shoot with the electronic shutter, and it's not a problem at all. It's not a problem in the absolute sense, but the electronic shutter can cause rolling shutter, and that's a problem, especially if you're shooting on a rush and if you are a very fast walker, someone who take pictures on the street walking really fast. Instead, with the lift shutter, everything is much more quiet, and I love it. And this means that I have no fear at all approaching street, rushing or getting too close to subject, because probably they're not gonna notice me. It's weird to say, but actually a huge part of my love for this camera comes from the semi-auto modes. With my Sony I mainly shoot full manual. I'd say in the 95% of the situation I shoot full manual, because I like to have control over my settings, over my exposure. I want to decide how to expose, and if I have to expose for the light or for the background, you know, all this sort of stuff. And I feel like that with my Sony camera it's just easier and faster. But here, for the sides, for the performance, for the files, I love to shooting in aperture priority. These things makes me feel like I'm playing, like I'm not actually taking pictures in a super serious way. Maybe it's because this is not a big chunk heavy monster. Yeah, definitely, maybe. That's why. And I'm saying this because when I do street photography, it's super important to me to feel like I'm achieving something, to feel rewarding about taking a shot. And with this camera, it feels rewarding. That's it. And how can we not talk about film simulation when it comes to Fujifilm? A cool and fun gimmick that makes photographer life easier and gives a nostalgic film look that we all love and we all try to achieve somehow, some way. And I'm totally okay with that. But I have to admit that I'm not that huge fan of film simulation, not because they are useful or because they are bad at all. They are great and some of them looks actually fantastic, but I simply love to edit my shots, so I prefer shooting RAW. Actually, this is the only camera I shoot RAW and JPEG both, but actually for a very specific reason that might surprise you, and it's because the preview on my LCD while shooting. But for instance, my girlfriend hates editing, so she always used the JPEGs. Being able to have already an idea of the final look of my shots boosts my serotonin and makes me shoot better. It's all placebo, I know, but come on. Knowing I already have some good shots makes me happier and lets me take better photos in some way. And speaking of film simulation, my favorite ones when it comes to shooting is Pro Negative Standard, but when editing is Classic Chrome. But this is totally up to you and your eyes and your taste and the look you want to achieve. I found myself more comfortable with these two. I feel like Classic Chrome has enough contrast for my editing process, especially in the skin tones of the people who subscribe to the channel. Thank you! Okay, and now let's move on to Lightroom. Okay, so the first thing I do is using the tone curve to pre-visualize the overall contrast of the final image and then toggle the sliders to achieve the exposure I want. Keep in mind that my workflow in editing is not always the same, especially with different cameras. With Sony, I usually spend a lot more time coloring an image. It feels a bit different, I don't really know why, but I suppose it's because of the color science. However, I find Fuji files a lot easier to edit. Maybe it's due to the size and the higher resolution, since it's a 40 megapixel on APS-C, but the files feels more dense and thick. And I love it. Honestly, let me tell you, I don't think this is the way that the calibration panel is supposed to be used. It's probably meant to match colors between different cameras, but I like using it as a tool to color. It's more intuitive, and since I was born and raised as a graphic designer, this slider is very similar to the ones I use in Photoshop. Moving on this one I wanted to try a different film simulation to give you a complete look on my edit. Here, once again, it's all about your taste. Is it actually too saturated for me? But it's not that bad. Also, with this low exposure shot, the colors tend to look more saturated on their own. And finally, the last one to close the circle is black and white. Fun fact, I fell in love with black and white at first because I wasn't that good with colors, and to this day I'm still trying my best to get the colors I want and the final look I have in mind. But it's harder than in monochrome images. So if you have any special tips, feel free to share it in the comments. I really hope you find this video helpful. If so, let me know in the comments your thought and leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Personally, I'm super happy about Fujifilm and I can't wait for them to drop the new X Pro 4. Please, Fuji, please. And also, I'm super curious about the future of the brand because this sensor has now my heart.